Thanks for sticking around. Those of you who are still awake will notice that the title of my presentation is not the one that's on the brochure. So those of you that were hoping for a presentation about modularity, I apologize and sorry for leading you up the garden path. Instead, I'm going to be talking about the problems with digital transformation. And I'm going to start today by telling you a story. And this story is about my very first, or in fact, my second job. This job was back in the late 1990s in London. My first job, in fact, was working behind the front desk of a hotel in Kensington High Street in London in the late 90s. And I was out one night and I was talking to some friends, and one of my friends said to me, "You won't believe it, I've just got this job at an internet company." And we all said, "Oh, what's that?" And he said, "Oh, this is amazing, it's so great, and they're looking for great people. Would you be interested in joining?" Now, I don't know if you can cast your minds back that far, but in the late 1990s, most people didn't have the internet in their homes. Those that did had a very, very simple dial-up setup. Smartphones hadn't been invented. Mark Zuckerberg was probably still in school. So it was really a time when we were really at the very beginnings of the first dot-com boom. And I called my dad and I said, "I've just been offered this job at this internet company and I'm thinking about leaving the hotel." And he said, "Well, that is a truly terrible idea." So of course, I left the hotel and I went to work for this internet company. This internet company was based in a tiny little shop above Regent Street. We had about 10 people, and this company was called lastminute.com. I don't know if any people here have heard of lastminute.com or have booked flights with them, but those of you who haven't heard of lastminute.com is a travel website where you can kind of get really good last-minute deals on flights, on hotels, on entertainment tickets, and so on and so forth. So I joined lastminute.com when they had about 10 people. And my job, having been in the hotel industry previously, was to go to hotels and persuade them to give us their inventory. And the way that we did that, because in these days, we didn't have global reservation systems where, you could kind of have real-time feeds into your websites. This is the way that we got inventory onto our website back in the late 1990s. I would walk around London with a backpack full of pieces of paper that were little forms, and I would go and talk to the people that ran the hotels. And I would say, "Can I leave these with you? And if around about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the evening, you think you've still got some rooms to sell, then maybe you could just fill in this form and you could fax it back to us and we could put it on our website." So one of the first hotels that I managed to persuade to do this was the Ritz. And the guys at the Ritz, they'd get to about 4 or 5 o'clock, they'd see what rooms were not available, they'd write down the name of the room and the type of room, they'd write down the price of the room, and then they would fax it through to us at our very small little office above a shop on Regent Street. And this would then print out of the fax machine, and someone in our office would take that and literally hard code that inventory into the website. So pretty much anyone with HTML skills would sit in front of a computer and just hard code would look at the source code, would hard code these hotel rooms into this website. And then you just send them live. So there was no such thing as a content management system then. There was no quality control. We just put whatever we wanted up on the website and it went immediately live out to customers. And then along comes our customer, sees a great deal at the Ritz, thinks that'd be fantastic for me and my girlfriend, I'm going to book a night at the Ritz, good deal. And he books it online, puts in his credit card details and press book now. And he thinks that he's just booked a night at the Ritz. But there's a long way to go before he's booked a night at the Ritz, because, and bear with me with this story because I do have a point to it, so he says, "Right, I've booked this night." And what happens is on the other side of the office from the fax machine, there's a printer, and anytime someone books something, an order would print out of this printer, and someone would see this order come out, and they would pick it up, and they would run back to the other side of the office where the fax machines were, and then they would put that into the fax machine, dial up the number, send it back to the Ritz, and then place a phone call and say, hey guys, did you just get that reservation? And we would do this for thousands of bookings a week. We had, at one point, we had a bank of about 25 fax machines and the same of printers, where we would just pick things up and take them over and put them through. So, anyway, the point of this is that back in the day, this was what digital transformation was all about. Like, this was us literally learning as we went along. We had no idea what we were going to do the next day. All we knew was that we needed to provide this experience for our customers, and that we would do absolutely anything it took to do that. So around about March 2000, well, exactly in March 2000, we IPO'd lastminute.com. And this was at the height of the .com boom, particularly in Europe. Oh, excuse me. And we IPO'd for nearly £1 billion. And that was a huge sum of money in those days. It's still a huge sum of money now, but for an internet company in those days, that was a massive sum of money. And it was the biggest IPO, internet IPO, that Europe had seen at that point. But what I reflect on when I look back at that is that it didn't work. It wasn't really an internet company. It was an internet interface where you could pretend to book something, but everything else behind the scenes was held together, like by glue and by sellotape and by string. But what was so exciting about lastminute.com at that particular time was the promise that it gave. It was the promise of what the internet could deliver. And that was really, really, really exciting. And that was what made me want to stay in this industry for the 16 years that I've been in it since then. But the reason that I'm starting by telling you this story is because when I reflect on my journey in the internet industry and on how we've looked at and approached digital transformation in that period of time, and I look at the way that we approached it back then, which was, it was fearless. All we knew was that we had to get a really great experience out to customers. We didn't know how. We were making it up as we went along. We were taking new technology. We were plugging it in. We were improving as we could. When I look at that experience there, and then I fast forward to 16 years on to now, and I look at the way that organizations that I talk to approach digital transformation, it makes me kind of sad, because I think maybe we've over-corporatized this idea of digital transformation. I think that we've managed to, I don't know, process the hell out of it. Really, we've got it to a point where we've made it into a thing, you know. It's a term, digital transformation, but it's not something that actually happens. So I've been thinking about this a lot, kind of in preparation for this talk and this presentation, and I wanted to have a think about where we're at now, whether it's working, and if it's not working, why it isn't working, and what we might do differently to get it to work as we kind of all move forward on our digital journeys. So I'm aware that this is quite an obvious analogy, but bear with me. So there are at least 4 major national corporations that I have spoken to this week who are undergoing either a digital transformation or a customer transformation that follows this pattern. So this pattern being someone within the organization has a look around and says, digital, it really needs to be the cornerstone of everything we do. It really needs to be totally embedded in everything that we do. And then they have a look at their organization and their digital capability, and they see that really what they've got from a digital point of view is a grubby little caterpillar. So they say, right, we're going to set up a digital transformation project, and we're going to go into our digital transformation cocoon. And in that cocoon, we're going to put some developers, and we're going to put some UX people, and we're going to put some strategists, and we're going to throw a whole lot of money. We might even put some big systems in there as well. And then we're going to stay in that cocoon for a period of time. And then when we come out of the other side, we're going to be transformed. So, how many people here think this works? Good. I'm assuming that the lack of show of hands is not because you're all asleep, but because you agree with me. So there's a number of inherent problems with this. So first of all, is that it implies that digital transformation has an end state, that you will actually get a butterfly out of the end of it. And we should all know by now that digital transformation is not linear in this sense. It's a constant evolution, it's a constant learning, a constant redoing of the way we do things. So this notion that you have an end state that you can shoot for is already a little bit flawed. Then, the other problem with that is that we think that that end state should be a butterfly. So what if it's not a butterfly? What if it would be better off if it was a hummingbird or a rhino? But shit, we've got a butterfly. And it implies that we need to know that up front, but we might not know that up front. It also is a problem because of the amount of time that companies spend inside their cocoon. So organizations, and certainly, I don't know if there's any organizations that you work for, that you've heard of, certainly the ones that I've spoken to and worked with in the past, can spend from 6 months to, say, 5 or 6 years inside this cocoon, just working out what it is that they want to become. So I think that there are some inherent problems with the lens through which we view digital transformation these days. But how can we do it differently? Now, where are all the butterflies? The question I was going to ask you before. How can we look at this differently? I propose that we need to look at this through a different lens. And again, I think this might be an obvious analogy, but I think that enough people are still not getting this right that it's worth reinforcing. That transformation implies that organizations might undergo one big, very grand change. But evolution is really all about incremental, continuous change. And I think that if we can look at the way that we manage our digital journeys through a lens of evolution rather than through transformation, we'll start to have a lot more success with the type of projects that we do. So, I don't know if you can see this very well on the black, but you don't really need the image, it's just gratuitous. The thing that I believe that we do need to think about, rather than shooting for a particular end state, is really to start putting our energies towards creating the appropriate conditions for evolution. So I just want to talk to you about what a condition is. So a condition is a circumstance or factor that affects the way in which people live or work. So I believe that there are certain conditions that can be put in place that help you to evolve, that help organizations move through their digital journey. I think that every organization will be different. It will depend on your leadership style, on your culture, on how far along that journey you are already as to which condition you need to stand up to really help you work through this. But I thought I might share with you some of the conditions that we put in place at one of our clients who we've been working with over the last 6 months on a similar journey. So who here has heard of AHM? They're a health insurance brand. They're the low-cost health insurance brand of Medibank. So we've been working with them on their digital transformation for a while. And we put some conditions in place, and I want to share those with you. And I think I will share these with you as thought starters, but I wouldn't for 1 minute suggest that these should be the only conditions that you consider. What I would suggest is that if you go away from this talk having kind of taken anything with you, it would be that you would go and you might sit down and write yourselves a list and say, what are the conditions that are most appropriate to have digital evolution occur within my workplace? So just really quickly, because I think I've only got a few minutes, but I'll share with you some of these conditions that we put in place. So the first one was, one of the conditions for evolution was that they needed to have internal capability. So they couldn't just work with agencies. This client needed to have their own people on site who knew the brand, who were able to do stuff very quickly and quite cheaply. So over the course of working with them, over, say, a 6-month period, we started that period with almost everything outsourced to us. And as we went through that process, as well as sort of doing some development work for them, we also did recruitment for them. And we went out to market, we helped them with job descriptions, we sat on interview panels, and we helped them find a team that was great for them. And now we have much less people working on that project, and they have more people. So internal capability and having people that can do this job inside was a condition for their success. The other thing, another one was collaboration. So we knew that in order to be successful and to be constantly evolving, we had to be really great at collaborating, and that it wasn't just us and them, it was at least 4 or 5 other third parties, and we needed to be able to collaborate. So we put in place a condition around collaboration. We also put in place some tools that allowed us to do that, such as Slack, GitHub, Trello. But you know, you might think that that's a fairly easy thing to do, but when you're working within an organization like Medibank, who has a kind of approved set of suppliers, they're not all that happy with you saying, well, actually, we'd like to use Trello, we'd like to use Slack when it's not an approved software. And we had to fight for a lot of this. Another condition was that we had to have really strong governance and be very transparent about that, because otherwise we wouldn't get permission to keep on doing what we were doing. We also needed to set up a culture that meant that we could recruit the best people in the digital space. You know, you don't necessarily get the most creative people or the best developers wanting to move into the health insurance space. So we had to create a culture that made that a place where they could work and they wanted to work. And the last one I'll talk to you about, because I'm seriously running out of time, is one of the conditions for success. In fact, I'm going to go with 2. I've got 2 more. One of the other conditions for our success and our conditions for evolution there was role modeling. So we haven't spent too much time doing big business cases, trying to ask people for money, trying to say these are the things that we're going to do. But every time we had success, we would role model that back to the Medibank organisation, to the point where over the last 6 months, the Medibank organisation has come to the AHM team to ask them for advice on how they should be running their digital projects. The last one is not one of the conditions from that job, but I am going to suggest that it should be a condition that you put down on your lists, and that is bravery. And the reason I put bravery in is because when I think back to the original story that I told you about lastminute.com and what made that so successful, I think the thing that made it so successful was bravery. You know, this was new frontier stuff. It was uncharted territory. No one had done it before, but we just didn't care. We just knew that we could do this, and we were so into it that we were not going to give up. And we really, really, really pushed ahead with that in the face of a lot of adversity. So if you had one condition, maybe at the top of your list, I would suggest make it bravery. But then have a think about what are the other conditions that you might put on that list that are going to help you be more successful in your digital projects. So my time's up. Thanks for listening.